I've been using the RP diet to fuel my weightlifting performance for years, and RP's simple, science-based approach has been instrumental to my success. With the new RP Diet app, following RP's principles is as easy as entering my goals and schedule and choosing my favorite foods. The app builds a diet to my exact needs, reminds me to eat my meals, and adapts to my body's changes every single day and week. The RP Diet app is a huge help in my quest to become the best athlete I can be, and if your goal is to be your best, it will help you.
Folks, welcome back to weekly webinar with Dr. Mike and Dr. James. I'm Dr. James. He's Dr. Mike. We got a lot of questions today. We're just going to get right into it. Shazam.
TJ Jankowski says, hey, chaps, right to the questions. Number one, I'm taking this time to improve my flexibility for BJJ, but also because, you know, flexibility, what's the point of being jacked if you can't flex?
Fair enough.
From what I'm aware, there's decent evidence that excessive stretching can inhibit strength gains. Is this how it appears to impact hypertrophy, or is there something also mechanistically involved? There's obviously that whole movement behind DC style stretching and big stretching to improve hypertrophy, plus male gymnasts are rather flexible and also rather jacked. They're not rather jacked. They're rather jacked for being 5'2", 130 pounds. Let's keep that in perspective. Also, they don't have any legs, but anyway. So also, here's another thing. Gymnasts train like 80 hours a week to get that jacked. Like, it's not a highly efficient form of training. But in any case, is it just because they are elite / the time they put in? Yes, that's correct. Or because stretching doesn't affect hypertrophy specifically? It does. Split Garvey, I know, but still one to consider from what I understand. And our mentor, Bill Sands, did some of this work in education. We were PhD students. Stretching, very, very, very intense stretching is essentially acts as another stressor. And loaded stretching can increase the amount of muscle you have lengthwise by a small amount, but extreme stretching to enhance flexibility can reduce force production, probably not the mechanism by which it reduces hypertrophy potential, but stretching is in and of itself stressful. It causes damage, and healing from that damage is probably the biggest way in which it interferes with hypertrophy. James?
Yeah, I'd say the effect is more pronounced in strength and power from what I've gathered just from looking into it a little bit. It's definitely more like you can affect the stretch shortening cycle of the muscle. You can affect the force output. You can actually affect like the joint pliability in a bad way. There doesn't seem to be any like super direct effects on hypertrophy outside of what Mike already described. So I would say, but just also keep in mind, like this is, the amount of stretching you have to do to elicit these effects is massive. So, I mean, like normal dynamic warm-up, normal static stretching, normal additional flexibility and mobility training, in addition to that, the stuff you might be doing in the gym is perfectly fine. Where you start to see problems is when people are doing like 2 hours of hard stretching per day. That's where you start to run into these issues.
Yeah. Number two, if there is an impact specifically on stretching for hypertrophy after you answer question one, could be negative or positive. How about when training at maintenance? I'm at an arm-focused mass, but I'm training my legs in MV and looking to potentially up my lower body stretching. Thoughts on some good old PNF stretching versus dynamic flexibility, like just doing deep, light, like leg squats, RDLs to increase my hamstring mobility. Thanks, motherfuckers. James?
Both are fine. Both are fine. I don't see any issues. I mean, PNF is brutal if you guys have never done that before.
Right. Fuck
it's
that, dude.
Fucking awful, but it works. I mean, yeah. It's probably the best time to do that if you really want to focus on your like lower extremity flexibility.
Any other priority during maintenance is usually one of the best times to do it. Final question. How much are you guys secretly enjoying the stay-at-home part of this whole thing? Not at all. It's really liberating to not have too much of a choice in your activities. I wildly disagree, personally, anyway. Obviously, miss occasionally seeing people, but that can be done later. Am I right? No, am I just weird? Fine. Thanks, guys. Forgot how much I love asking these questions so weekly. Continue to do so. No, my personal note on this staying, I work at home. Anyway, so I don't have any problem staying at home, and it's not weirdly liberating at all to not have much of a choice in my activities. I think it's terrible and literally, in the literal sense, oppressive because your sort of compulsory stay-at-home orders are, by definition, oppression. It may not be net negative, but that's nonetheless what it's called. And I can't wait until we have our free economy and association back. Fuck all this noise. Although I will say, making the best of what you can with things is really good. The thing is, James and I usually are sequestered, and now everything that's been cut off from us is just everything we like to go out for. So yes. We already had the best of both worlds. Now we have the worst of some. James?
You know, I definitely agree with what you for me, just like you, since I work from home as well. It was kind of like my lifestyle was already 90% compliant with what they were asking us to do. So on the one hand, I don't really have a lot of grounds to complain, but just the fact that I can't do that other 10% of activities is really annoying. It's like if you guys have cats and you close a door in the house and the cat comes and yells at you because the door is closed, not because they actually want to go in there, they're just mad that they cannot go in there.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, right? So my conservative side has been coming out more and more lately, where I'm just like, this is bullshit. The problem I have is that I don't actually socialize very much because I don't have a lot of friends out here and I work from home. And so now it's like I socialize even less than normal. So for me, that's definitely not a great thing either, aside from the oppressive standpoint. I would like to be able to socialize more, even if it just meant like going out and buying things at a store and interacting with another human being. That would be nice.
All right. Tiano P.
I keep always thinking Thanos when I see that name.
Yeah,
I don't know what about it.
Hi, both. Hope you're coping well with pandemic madness. I'm sure you have covered this already, so could you please direct me to your content regarding hypertrophy training during a hypocaloric diet, not mini cut, how to adjust training volume and intensity as the diet progresses to minimize muscle loss.
How much should I train?
Thank you in advance. That's right. How much should I train is probably the best place. The hypertrophy book, which is being edited currently, will be absolutely the best place after that. But how much should I train for now? And then he says, P.S. The gym-free template is awesome. It's like I never left the gym. Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Awesome.
When we were crafting that, I was telling people in a preview, I was like, you're going to wish the gym opens up just so you don't have to be hurt as much anymore physically.
No more push-ups, please, God.
Seriously. Metabolite training sucks. All right, another question from Tiano. My question / post is quite lengthy and specific, therefore I apologize, but I was wondering if the programming I am getting is good enough for hypertrophy purposes. Your opinion would be greatly appreciated. Super quick background to draw a better picture. I'm relatively new to hypertrophy training, started about 1.5 years ago, but before that I was doing CrossFit weightlifting style training. I'm doing total body hypertrophy training with a slight focus on glute development. My question is, based on this example of mesoprogramming, do you think that what I'm doing is enough or too much for glute hypertrophy? Furthermore, I currently have some lower back issues, so I refrain from doing sumo DLs as I find they irritate my lower back. Is a lack of sumo DLs going to majorly impact glute hypertrophy? So I'm just going to answer that one for James and I both, unless James protests and say no. If you make it up for another movement, you're totally fine. Cool. Obviously, every person needs slightly different amounts of stimuli for hypertrophy, and it's hard for you to give me a definitive answer when you haven't seen the previous two meso programs. Generally speaking, I always follow your recommendations for the meso progressions. Training is still based on RIR, and training landmarks in mind. Okay, if that's the case with the landmarks, especially, I mean, there's kind of a no fail unless your frequency is weird. So James and I are going to take a look at this, and then go from there.
Just to reiterate that as well, like it's hard for us to answer the question of enough, too much, or just right, because we don't know your volume landmarks, right? So we can kind of speculate based on whatever you have written here, but it's hard to give a hard answer on that.
Yeah, but the good news is like we can give you our like just sort of squint test, see if it's like within a normal range, and everything else after that is, you know, as long as you know. So the great thing is you know what the training volume landmarks are. So like you're good, but let's see if you really fuck things up. So lower day, we're going to focus specifically on glutes, right? Because it's
like the way you put that.
Yeah.
See if you really fucked it up.
So lower day one. Okay. I suppose there's only 3 days of training per week.
I think he just didn't bother writing in the upper body stuff.
Okay. All right. 4x12 seated leg curls, 6x8 squats, 4x10 leg press, 4x12 Bulgarian split squats, leg extensions, and hip thrust superset, and frog pumps.
That is a lot.
There's a pull day, and there's glutes, 4x8 stiff deadlift. I think you said you weren't doing.
He said he wasn't doing sumo. Yeah.
4x8 stiff, 4x25 leg curls, 4x12 deficit sumo squat, step ups.
What's a deficit sumo squat? Am I missing something?
Yeah.
Oh, does he mean like he's like standing on? I see. Never mind. I was thinking barbell. He's probably holding something in between.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Good call. And then hip thrusts, and then the lower day 2, stiff-legged deadlift, walking lunges, hack squats. Yeah. So that is a shitload of glute volume.
That's a lot.
Now, you may be doing too much, but then your MRV should catch it. So as long as you're detecting MRV using performance, you're at least doing enough. At least enough. That's all.
Yeah. I would say for somebody, I mean, like your hypertrophy you're effectively a beginner, but you had been doing CrossFit and weightlifting training. So I would say you're probably more like an intermediate lifter. That would be my guess.
Agreed.
So I would say, you could consider just consolidating your exercise selection down a little bit. You got a lot of exercise variance in there.
Agreed.
You could just maybe switch it, just reduce the number of exercises, increase the number of ones that you're already doing.
Yeah.
That'd be
I'd
helpful.
also say put your glute work a little earlier in your program. In as far as like beginning of the sessions should be more of the glute work. You seem to be spreading it out a lot. So some squats and leg presses, but then you go back to split squats and then back to hip thrusts at the end. I would say sort of start more with glutes and finish with all the other stuff. That'd probably be a better use of your time.
Yeah, but like Mike said, if your volume landmarks and your tracking is in line, then that should be mostly fine.
All right. Harrison Caton. Hi, Drs. Mike and James. In response to your answer about how to present yourself as a coach from last week's webinar, you were right on target. Your answer has really helped about doing a reasonable job in reasonable conditions, being helpful, listening, and supportive, as well as not worrying about being super smart when I'm just starting out. I'll also add conscious coaching to my reading list. Now for a couple of questions. Nice. Are there any resources on RP Plus that you know of that cover how to comprehend studies and meta-analyses, specifically the statistical terms like p-value and whatnot? So we don't have anything to comprehend the statistical terms, but we do have theory of science lectures. They were posted a long time ago, one of the first ones. There's a theory of science course, the super basics, that covers the different kinds of scientific studies, the different kinds of literature reviews. That's a real good place to start. And then as far as statistical terms like p-value and whatnot, I would honestly do some reading, just to get some basic articles on like understanding statistics, or take an online course or a series of YouTube videos or something about basic statistics, and they'll teach you stuff. What I wouldn't do is read like one little article where they tell you what that stuff is. I think you need like more of a book or a multiple YouTube video course or some kind of Coursera course to really understand what it is you're looking at, because it's real easy to think you know what statistics mean, and it turns out it's a little bit different. So I would recommend a bit of a deeper dive.
I'm actually going to go a slightly different route than Dr. Mike on this one. And I know this is how this is going to sound, so I say this with the utmost of respect and dignity, but meta-analyses are not meant for lay persons, and it's not meant to say that you're stupid or not capable of understanding them at some point, but they're designed for other scientists in the field to read them and be able to understand them. And so just as an example, even in our field of exercise physiology, the statistics that they use in meta-analysis are like often beyond our comprehension of what it is, because those researchers go get biostatisticians to do the stats for them, right? They say, here's the stuff I want you to look at, do the math for me, and then tell me what to write in the methods, right? That's the level of math and stuff that we're doing. So it's on two levels that it's not appropriate for lay persons. One, you don't understand the content that's going in, so it's hard for you to differentiate, is it good? Are the things going into the meta-analysis, and this is true for review articles as well, are the things going in actually useful and good, or have they met a good inclusion-exclusion criteria standards? And then number two is like, do you even understand the math that's actually being used? And Mike and I have some education in that, but we're certainly not statisticians. We know how to look at it and say like, okay, I can take a little bit away from these things. But if somebody was to be like, should they have done a 6x3 Pankova or a 17x9 Schmagmanova? I'd be, I don't know, dude. I can tell you that what the effect size meant and what the statistical significance were and what the take-home points are, but I cannot tell you if this was an appropriate level of math. So my point being, it might be a fool's errand to try and learn how to really understand a meta-analysis, because it's meant for people like who are actual professionals in that particular area.
But if you want to go down that route, you need a course in statistics.
Yeah.
Okay, Max Jenkins says, hello, docs. I wanted to ask you two quick questions. Please excuse my presumption. Jeez, already presumptuous. Number one, I know specifically Dr. Mike and James Krieger have spoken about how decreasing rest times tends to increase the number of sets required to achieve the same stimulus that would be generated from doing fewer sets with longer rest times. So my question is, does reducing rest times increase one's set MRV, or do you just end up getting fewer stimulative sets within your MRV? So your MRV is your maximum recoverable volume. That's how much stuff you're doing. A more technical way is how much exposure to stimulus and to damage and disruption you are capable of recovering from. Sets in which you rest a very short time, too short of a time between, just don't expose you to as much disruption as sets when you do rest plenty and you fuck shit up hardcore and get like double the reps, and more of the reps are fast twitch muscle limited and take tons of damage. So you can't, as the MRV is the same either way. So, which is why James and I actually in the last webinar were really specific about if you're planning rest times between sets, use the same algorithm every session or the same literal time every session between sets. Don't mix and match, because if you start to rest a lot longer, or sometimes you time your sets, sometimes you just go by the 4-point criteria we've described, then yeah, your MRV as far as number of sets is really, really different, and you'll fucking have no idea what it is. But that your true, what really is your MRV is really the same number. It's like saying, hey, like I stopped counting calories and started counting kilojoules. That means I can eat way more food. Like, not the same amount of food, just counting differently. So multiple sets versus, or low rest time sets versus high rest time sets, it's still the same amount of disruption. It's just the disruption starts to be difficult to standardize between the different sets.
Totally agree.
Cool. Also, if reducing rest time does require you to do more sets to reach a given set of if reducing rest time does require you to do more sets to reach a given stimulus, would that in turn mean reducing rest times could be prudent while cutting, since more total volume would need to be performed, therefore increasing caloric expenditure? So it's actually not clear that resting shorter between sets increases caloric expenditure, because you end up doing fewer reps per set. To the extent that if you rest very, very small amounts, you might end up doing more repetitions you'd have to reduce your loads at that point significantly, or do way, way, way more sets. And then you get a higher fractional involvement of slower twitch fibers, and you do get more calorie burning, but the expense of anabolism. James and I are very clear on this. I think for most people that are very sort of like optimality oriented and want the best possible results, like if you want to save time, it's a different discussion. Optimize your hypertrophy training to grow you muscle or to save it, and then optimize your cardio or physical activity to burn calories. Don't try to do both at the same time. So you end up being like sort of halfway to something and halfway to something else. James?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I kind of get what direction you were going with that question, where you're saying like, oh, you're doing more sets and creates a bigger metabolic, stimulus, right? No, because in the other sets, when you rest longer, you get more reps anyway. Yeah, so unless like the volume,
sets of 15,
right? So it's like if your average ends up being 10 reps across 3, or however many sets that you did, if the total number of reps or the total volume load is similar, then the calorie difference is not going to be very different. And that's the other thing is like during your actual lifting and exercise time, it's not really burning a ton of calories compared to your NEAT and other type of activities throughout the day. So it's not necessarily a good strategy to try and maximize output during your session, because you might just be running yourself to the ground for no reason.
Yep. 2, on a more personal level, I've observed that whenever I push my volumes to what is relatively high for me, but not really that high, generally 10 to 13 sets per body part per week, after a few days, I flatten out tremendously. It becomes very tough to get a maintained pump, and my physique looks noticeably worse. This seemingly happens regardless of if my diet is hypo, or isocaloric. I also eat low fat, high carb. It has not really ameliorated the problem either. I suppose it's quite obvious that I'm likely or near or over my MRV. However, at around 9 sets per muscle per week, I'm not flat, and I feel like I'm extremely recovered and nowhere near my MRV. I've taken low volume phases as well, and I've returned to higher volumes. Nothing really changes. I'll add that I'm not advanced or strong at all. So moving from 8 sets to 10 sets is not me adding 2 additional sets of 8 reps of 400 pounds on bench or something. I would love to know y'all's thoughts on this predicament. One thought I've had is maybe when my volumes get higher, I need to disproportionately jack on my carb intake. I'm on the taller side, 6'3", 210, and 10 to 13% body fat, lean. Obviously not lean enough to be one of the elite, I guess. Elite, I will say. I assume this is elite. So my first hypothesis is that you just have a really narrow MEV to MRV window. And nothing wrong with that. That's just a thing. Also, you may need to eat more carbs. That may very well be a thing. You may be genetically just burn more glycogen or something. It's totally a thing. You may just have a really high level of physical activity. There's tons and tons of other potential explanations. But honestly, like, just go from MEV to MRV. And if you don't have a big pathway to travel, that's so totally fine. Just stay somewhere between the two and you'll get great gains. And when you deplete and feel flat and when your performance starts to suffer, deload and repeat. That's that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know if your flatness kind of corresponded with typical MRV type symptoms. If you just started to overreach, whether locally or systemically or both, that would make a lot of sense. And then, like as Dr. Mike already said, that would just mean your MEV to MRV window is relatively small, and that's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is. Other than that, and the carbs thing, I got nothing.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're flat but still performing better and better every week, I wouldn't really worry about it. You just they look cool when you're deloaded.
Yeah, or just start using synthol.
That's the best way. All right, Ellie Paulin. Like, I actually have no idea if this is a male or female, but let's find out.
I'm assuming it's a female, but I have no idea.
Hello, guys. While I'm eating for performance myself, I've had those questions for a number of years due to my friends. Question 1. What is the quality of the scientific evidence supposedly demonstrating the superiority of plant-based diets or increasing longevity and health status as opposed to omnivore diets? Poor. And if you want a really sweet analysis of that, Dr. Melissa Davis has an article on Renaissance periodization about, what the fuck was that movie called?
Game Changers.
Game Changers. Game Changers critique, Melissa Davis. Google that and you'll get a really awesome article.
I believe it's called The Game Remains Unchanged.
Yeah,
something
Game
similar
Unchanged.
Game Unchanged.
So, yeah, the quality of the scientific evidence demonstrating the awesomeness of plant-based diets for increasing longevity and health status is excellent. But its superiority to omnivore diets is non-existent if you really dig into the research. Turns out various diets for omnivore are or proxy diets for omnivore healthy is really omnivore unhealthy. And when you remove various unhealthy things that both vegans and meat eaters should not really be eating a lot, things get better. So
go figure.
Yeah. By the way, I just got my blood work done. I'm sharing this to the world. My total cholesterol is 100.
Oh, okay.
Which is apparently super fucking low.
That's really low. Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome. All right. Are the underlying proposed physiological processes sound in light of current scientific understanding, protein loosening, methionine restriction, for example? So lower protein dieting and plant-based dieting is absolutely not the same thing at all. People will conflate the two. They shouldn't, for 2 reasons. 1 is they're just physically not the same thing. 2, it is possible for people who are plant-based to eat a high degree of protein, like athletes and bodybuilders, think they're getting the benefits of a low-protein diet, but in fact are not. There is a certain amount of protein that is associated with various longevity-reducing mechanisms. They haven't been incredibly well-studied enough for us to be very, very conclusive about them. But yeah, probably eating a whole bunch of protein probably increases your quality of life, but may reduce your longevity in a very extreme scenario. So the underlying proposed physiological processes sound in light of current scientific understanding regarding protein loosening methionine restriction, for example, they make sense, and it could very well be that very high levels of protein intake reduce longevity to some small extent. But that probably has a quality of life trade-off because you'll almost certainly be less muscular if you eat less protein, specifically in light of physical activity. And there's definitely something to consider there. So, and lastly, like I said, the first, it's not the same thing as plant-based diet.
Great answer. I got nothing.
And then last one, what are your thoughts on calorie restriction for longevity in the current state of associated evidence? Very strong, very strong. Calorie restriction works. If you are going to live as long as possible, you should be on the lighter lower bound of the sort of insurance table body weight risk calculator, right? So like for my height, I'm like 5'6". I would be roughly like 120 to 140 pounds is where I would live my longest. Now I'm like 100 pounds heavier than that. I never claimed to be, God, I wonder what my blood work would be if I was 120. Immortal, just the
be
blood
really
work comes
good.
back. It's like, you're fine. You're going to be great until you're 96. But the reality is, calorie restriction for longevity is a fucking thing. And the more food you eat over the course of your life, even if you do physical activity, though physical activity helps a lot, the more you essentially wear out cellular structures and the metabolism cranks away and it starts to get damaged and then you die sooner. The real thing is, what is the trade-off of quality of life? And very many people forget that. You know, they say, okay, I'm going to do fasting, but then I'm also going to have cheat meals and all this other stuff. Like, well, if you don't weigh very little, you're not going to get the benefits. It's not the calorie restriction that benefits you. It's the weighing less, right? The weighing less is an exact correlate of how much net calorie restriction you had. So it is the calorie restriction that benefits you, but the only way you know if you're doing net calorie restriction is if you in fact weigh very little. Because just the same, if someone says like, well, I weigh 190, but I do intermittent fasting, so like I do get the benefits of calorie restriction. Yeah, to some extent that's true, but unfortunately, in order to stay 190, you got to smash food when you're not restricting calories, and smashing, overfeeding has a shitload of evidence that it's really bad for you. So it's kind of good and bad balance out. And they have a real hard time telling apart two people that weigh very little, let's say 140 pounds both, where most of their peers weigh 200. They have a hard time telling apart their longevity of how they got there, as long as they got there in a healthy manner and are still physically active and eat healthy foods. Those people live roughly the same amount of time, whether they got there through intermittent fasting or they got there through eating 8 meals a day. It doesn't really matter. So calorie restriction is the thing. Long-term calorie restriction means it's going to reflect in your body weight, which means, do you want to eat like a bird and weigh 120 and get to see a lot of life, or do you want to enjoy the foods you love with, responsibly and in a state of balance and live a little, a few years less long, but have awesome baller times? Or do you want to be 600 pounds and have food as the only thing you enjoy in life and then live till you're 40? Those are all somewhere on the spectrum. So for you to decide.
Really good. Dr. Mike, what is that thing that says volume on you? Is that a shirt? What is that?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's there's a Hong Kong, we put on a seminar, and their gym was called Volume.
Oh.
They actually named the gym after our volume landmarks concepts.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, isn't that neat?
That's super neat.
All right, Mike Rossi.
Did you? Sorry, I don't want to. This popped in my mind. Did you see Eric Helm's post recently? It was a very volume landmarks post. I was like, see, he's coming around.
No, where was it?
I believe it was on Instagram. It was basically just like a, typical kind of training curve of like what is essentially what we've called, MEV, MAV, MRV. And it was just like optimal, like point of maximal inflection, like diminishing returns, like inverted U, typical, stuff that we've been.
Trippy. Yeah, I didn't catch that. I usually catch all of his shit. I did see that he interviewed Melissa Davis, which is cool.
Yeah. So he's been like, constructively critical of some of the volume landmark stuff, but I think he has been critical because, and maybe rightfully so, that when we talk about the volume landmarks, we often are assuming that like the other factors like intensity and frequency are inappropriate ranges, which they may not be for anybody. And I think that's kind of what his beef was. You can't just say like, oh, it's this volume stuff, the intensity and the frequency have to also align, which is true. And I think he maybe just thought that we threw those out the window. Yeah. I'm not sure, but definitely seems like he's on the same page one way or another. Yeah, he's a sharp guy.
All right, Mike Rossi. Sorry, I shouldn't be chewing during Lebanon. Background: I'm due for a resensitization phase, and I'm having trouble deciding how to proceed given the current circumstances. Pre-pandemic, I had finished my 5th consecutive meso of massing. I'm set to begin a low-volume hypocaloric resensitization phase, mini-cut. However, during my deload week, it became clear that gyms will be closing soon, so I chose to run another hypercaloric high-volume mess cycle since I knew it would be very difficult to run a resensitization phase. With so much novel training, I didn't want to risk undershooting volume in the absence of heavy loading with the introduction of novel exercises. I've now finished my first full meso at home and was able to train hard and continue making progress. I've gone from 173 to 185 over 6 mesos. I'm likely sitting in the 18 to 20% body fat range. I have an adjustable bench, adjustable dumbbells up to 52.5 pounds. Hey, I think we have the same dumbbells. Mm-hmm. Dip inverted row bars. Nice. Leg extension, leg curl, preacher curl bands. Fuck you. What? You live in a gym. So I'm able to run effective overload workouts with some special techniques as cluster sets and pretty exhausting when it's needed to keep the rep ranges in the 10-20 range for compounds. I've read the mini-cut manual, but I've never executed a proper mini-cut resensitization phase before. I understand its utility and potentiating further gaining, but I'm concerned about the potential for undershooting my volume landmarks and losing muscle under these circumstances. You shouldn't have to worry about that because that's actually very hard.
Yeah, it's surprisingly difficult to do that.
I've run enough fat loss phases to know that I have trouble holding on to muscle gains if I'm not meticulous. So it's especially important for me to settle at a higher body weight before entering a deficit. Having said that, which of the following would you recommend assuming? As I do, the gyms will be closed for the foreseeable future. Number one,
I think they might start opening up. Well, it depends on where you live, but it seems like there's been enough protesting and stuff that people are kind of open to the idea of reopening commerce.
Yeah. Actually, the City Fitness Fishtown texted me yesterday that I text their members. I'm like, what the fuck? But it was like, so it was an auto text, but it directs back to a human being. It's like, can we help you with anything during this time? And I was like, yeah, well, are you guys going to open as soon as the governor says you can, or are you going to wait? He's like, I can't confirm that, but from what I understand now, we're going to open as soon as humanly possible. And I was like, thank fucking God.
Yeah, I'm sure that it's a lot of gyms might be going under at the time too. So I'm sure they want to open their doors. Because how many people did just stop paying their membership fees, right? They're like, oh, I'm just going to cancel my membership for the time being, not thinking that by doing so, it saves you a few bucks, but then your gym goes under later. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It sucks. It's a weird situation.
Isocaloric low volume phase, accomplished by reducing total sets but maintaining intensity of effort. Reduce total sets and keep them staggering each week, but keep standard RR progression getting closer to failure. Isocaloric low volume phase, accomplished by reducing total sets and intensity of effort. Reduce total sets, keep them staggering each week, leave more RIR. Hypocaloric low volume phase, accomplished by reducing total sets but maintaining intensity of effort. And then hypocaloric low volume phase, accomplished by reducing total sets, intensity of effort, and leave more RR. So number 4, don't do, because that's a recipe actually for muscle loss because you're not training hard anymore. And then hypercaloric high volume, don't do that anymore. You're done with that. 5 fucking mesos later, I would say my best option is number 1 is totally cool. If you're really beat up, number 2. But number 3 sounds totally fine, and you almost certainly won't lose any muscle. James?
Yeah, I was kind of leaning towards 1 and 2. I think 3 is also fine. The thing is, when I run into these situations with my clients, if you're really not sure, one thing that is always a safe bet is the isocaloric. Like, you can't fuck it up. So if you're on the fence and you can't quite make up your mind, I would just give you a gentle push towards do a low volume isocaloric phase, resensitize, keep your body weight stable, and then the world's your oyster at that point. You can do a full cut, you could do a mini cut later, and then go back into massing, whatever. You got a lot of options.
Agreed. All right, Hayden Dunn. Hey guys, for perspective, I'm sitting at 227 with 15% body fat, and the ultimate goal is around 232 to 235 at 10 to 12. I'm about to undergo a shorter second mass after maintaining for a while, and do so for 6 weeks on basic hypertrophy template. My question was, since I can easily meet my weight gain goal over that 6 weeks, 227 to 232 most likely, when I hit the metabolic phase, I was wondering if there could be any benefit to continue massing during this time and then maintain or cut after that, or maintain if hit the goal at the end of mass. I guess I'm asking mostly if the metabolic phase is the most beneficial when massing versus maintaining or cutting. Yes, it's fine during cutting. It's shitty, not the greatest thing during maintaining, great during massing. I don't want to waste potent phase. Nice use of words there. Potent phase by not periodizing correct way of diet. I would say, here's my best advice actually. Go from 227 to 232, but make it last 2 phases instead of 1. Slower rate of gain, higher percentage of muscle gain. It lets you still gain weight during that metabolite phase, but not get super fat. I would say that your best bet, hit around 232 to 234 at the end of your metabolite phase, basically put in 2 phases, each whatever 6 weeks long or however, and then you'll be fucking golden, and then you'll be ready to maintain. Good news, I don't know where you live, Hayden, but if you've got shutdowns and you can't go to a gym, that means your metabolite phase you can do at home no problem. And then in 6 weeks, most places in the world are going to be at least starting to think about it and maybe have already gone through reopening gyms. So real good side benefit there.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Actually, 12 weeks from now, fuck, you'll be gold. And then he says, okay. Drew Stevens. Doctors Mike and James, I was hoping to get your thoughts regarding the implementation of refeeds into a fat loss phase based on the findings of a recent study by Dr. Bill Campbell out of USF. I understand that it can be hard to draw conclusions from just one study, but your thoughts would be appreciated nonetheless. The study showed the refeed group lost roughly the same amount of total weight as the continuous deficit group, while losing less than half as much lean body mass. Additionally, the RMRs only dropped by about half of what the continuous groups did. As unfortunate as it is, maintenance phases are pretty boring to most people. Implementing refeeds possibly allow for more enjoyable fat loss phases. Would they allow for a quicker turnaround between fat loss phase, either the next fat loss phase or next muscle gain phase, i.e. standard 12-week diet calls for 4 to 6 maintenance once up to 10% body weight is lost. If using a 2-day carb refeed, only 60 out of 84 days would be spent in a deficit. RMR would hypothetically drop proportionally less than a continued deficit fat loss phase, meaning the same 12-week period, while offering the same relative loss with possibly higher lean mass retention. Relative loss doesn't mean absolute loss, by the way, but we'll get to that in a sec. Would only call for 3 to 5 week maintenance phase. maybe.
So there's a lot of question marks, but I don't see a lot of questions.
There will be.
Okay.
So this is okay. So he's asking here if the using a phase of training, or sorry, a diet that does 2-day carb refeeds for every week, if it can essentially accumulate less diet fatigue for you so you can shorten your maintenance phase. The answer is maybe. The best way to shorten a maintenance phase is to diet less weight off of you, or to take longer doing it. If you diet less weight off, or you take longer to diet the same weight off, your maintenance phase doesn't need to be as long. So if you diet off, 12 pounds in 6 weeks versus 12 pounds in 12 weeks, after 12 pounds in 6 weeks, you're fucked up. You need a gnarly maintenance phase. After 12 pounds over 12 weeks, it's just not as harsh of a diet. Maybe you need a little bit less maintenance. If you drop 6 pounds, you don't need a big maintenance. If you drop 12, you need a bigger maintenance. If you drop 18, you need a bigger maintenance. The thing is, if you have 2-day carb refeeds, the other days need to be concomitantly much lower in calories, which could be just as stressful on the net balance. Now, James and I do come from a perspective here where we do tend to think that cyclical approaches are best, specifically because there's times to push and there's times to pull back, times to push, times to pull back. So it's very, very possible that pushing hard for 5 days and then pedal off the gas, pushing hard for 5 days, pedal off the gas, is fundamentally better. It's like training a little bit less each day versus doing 5 hard days of training, 2 weekend days. James and I would say that the 5 hard days, 2 weekend days is better than training 7 days a week, even if you spread out the training. The same may be true of dieting, but unfortunately we don't have the really, really good direct literature to back that up. When you alter how much you eat based on activity levels, that tends to happen anyway to some extent. The only thing I would say is there's definitely some promise here. We don't know how big it is in the real world. We don't know if the results are just as hunky-dory. And there's one thing that may offset this: diet adherence and sort of constancy. If you have the same diet day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out, you tend to just lock in and do it.
Compliance.
Yeah, 2-day carb refeeds can really throw you off weight checking wise. They can reel you into like, I want more of this carbs. I've gotten some clients into some nasty diet psychology, myself included, if I do refeeds that are too aggressive, because then people start to look forward to the 2-day carb refeeds. They start to hate the regular times. You get headaches from not enough carbs after. There's like a carb hangover that's involved. Tons of nasty shit. I don't know if the refeeds in the week make a huge difference in the real world, and I don't know if it's worth the psychology. But if the psychology doesn't bother you, I think it's definitely a thing to try. And then I'm not sure if that will reduce your requirement for maintenance.
Yeah, so I think there's some promise to some of these approaches for athletic populations, where if you are underweight or overweight, you might not actually have 16 weeks to dedicate to just doing body composition alteration within your competition cycle. That's like 4 months out of your competition year that you're just doing body comp. That means that's 4 months that you're not doing like a lot of actual sport training, because your systemic fatigue and your local fatigue is going to be too hard for you to express your sport skills, tactics, and relevant fitness. So I think in some of these cases, some of these shorter approaches might benefit sporting athletes who have to do major body composition change and can't afford to spend a ton of time doing it. Although I think a better approach would be to do it the way that we usually do it and just be more on top of your weight and be more proactive about it, rather than reactive and saying, oh, I need to lose a whole bunch of weight, but I can't sacrifice performance. That's more of an issue of bad planning and bad, weight management. You know what I mean? So
before I get to the rest of this, sorry, go ahead, James.
Yeah. So I was just saying, like, I've seen the refeed stuff. There's also like a similar approach where people will do like diet for 2 weeks on, diet for 2 weeks off, and they kind of have similar trend in the data. Those things might be great for athletes. It might not be great for people who are mostly just doing body composition and health promotion type stuff, in my opinion.
Before I go on, you want to look into the debate. It was a podcast debate, I think, on Jacob Skepis' podcast, JPS Health, between Menno Henselmans and Eric Helms on diet breaks and refeeds, because a lot of points made by both are really excellent, and a lot of points made by Menno really, really question the refeed stuff. So then the next question is, or could this effect possibly be used to increase the percentage of body weight that can safely be lost over the course of a single fat loss phase by extending the number of weeks spent in a deficit? 5-day deficit, 2-day refeed means 70% of the time spent at deficit. So can an individual hypothetically diet for up to 16 weeks and lose 50% body weight? I mean, yeah, like if it's not as harsh, yes. That really actually just depends on how your deficit is in the refeed. It's entirely arbitrary. So here's what I mean. It's constrained by what your goals are. If you say I want to lose 12 pounds in 3 months, the degree of your deficit is going to have to be higher if you do 2-day refeeds with it. If you say, okay, I'm not going to diet any harder on the deficit, then by definition, you can't lose that amount in 12 weeks. You now have to lose it in like 16. So it's really your call. And then he says, finally, I know the Matador study used frequent diet breaks and saw improved fat loss in the intermittent restriction group, but similar fat-free mass losses. However, that study was done on obese males. With this new study's results, make it safe to assume that using Matador protocol could potentially lead to both significantly greater fat loss and better FFM preservation in resistance trained athletes. No, it absolutely cannot be used to make that conclusion because it's just one study and very, very difficult to do tight controls on studies like this. And it says, if so, would it be worth implementing something like that due to sheer time cost, near double of a standard cut? Is it possible similar results would be seen if the refeed study had been 16 weeks instead of 7? And it says, there's a strong chance I'm way off base here, very excited to hear your thoughts. Yeah, a lot of the stuff, unfortunately, is just not very clear. The biggest questions about, I'm actually just going to frame this to you for you to think about. And this is something Menno framed on a podcast debate on this, and the response to it was like, oh, well, I guess that's a good point. It's not so clear that diet breaks work from the perspective of enhancing your efficiency of dieting, because if you take diet breaks, you have to go less aggressively, and that takes longer. So why don't you just get to the point, diet quicker, and stop? It may be that taking more diet breaks or fewer diet breaks has roughly the same result, or maybe taking diet breaks has a better result on lean mass retention by a small margin, but it takes longer. And the Menno Henselman's response would be, why not just stop your diet that you did, short diet, and get back into massing and more high quality massing? You may save a lot more time. Fundamentally, it turns out that losing fat without losing a lot of muscle is actually not that hard. Gaining muscle is really tough, especially for more advanced people. So you're going to want to spend way more time in a surplus than a deficit. So that being the case, unless you're dieting for competition, where you need to keep stress levels low and really have a sort of long-term approach at it, the diet break stuff would have to be very, very convincing in order to justify its time cost. But there might be a thing there where an occasional return to maintenance within a diet or refeed has benefits above and beyond that. It's just not clear to me that that's been shown yet.
Yeah, same. I mean, it also could be like a personal, like some people have compliance issues at certain, rates and styles. So some might be just better for other people to adhere to, but I'm not really convinced either way at this point. And so for me, getting the cut done in a timely manner is the tried and true. And I'm going to keep doing that with my clients and other people until I see something that's really convincing otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Oh, our friend Valentin Quiroga, who says, hello, docs. Could you please explain and clear up the differences between lactic acid and lactate, please? Yeah, it's super easy. Lactic acid is lactate plus hydrogen ion. Lactate is just lactate.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like lactic acid becomes lactate in water. Boom.
Because the hydrogen ion gets peeled away and is no longer active. Well, that's it. Lactic acid is two things. That's it. Greetings from Argentina. We met Valentin in Australia, by the way, James.
Yeah, I remember.
He's great.
He was nice.
Jackson Brim says, hi, Dr. Mike and James. Thank you for answering questions about my mile training and about physicians. I have a few questions that are not really specific to my program, but training in general. How do you deal with paralysis by analysis? As someone who is very analytical and somewhat of a perfectionist, as I'm sure most RP Plus people are, it is hard for me to be confident in my programming. At the same time, it is very hard for me to trust others with my programming. I invariably end up looking at it and saying, oh, it violates XYZ principle. Since I'm concurrent training, it makes it especially hard since some of the issues I'm running into are just not really covered in detail anywhere. What would you recommend here? Alex Viada's book is real good. The Hybrid Athlete, that'll cure most of what ails you, I think. It's a good start. Just try to learn everything about endurance and concurrent training and just try my best. I'm an exercise science major, so I understand physiology well. I would just start with Alex Viada's The Hybrid Athlete. A real good start. James, any other recommendations? I mean, what do you think about? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's good to be analytical. It's good to be quantitative on these things. But yeah, paralysis by analysis is a real thing. At some point, like, you do your best, you write down a reasonable training program, make some maybe adjustments after you do that. And then at some point, you just got to shut up and run it. You just got to fucking run that program. And then you can auto-regulate as you go and make adjustments. And that way you have a feedback and a feed-forward mechanism to build your next mesocycles, right? I think that's the best way to go about it. So you have a pre-planned strategy that you were thoughtful and you took into many things into consideration. You said, this is how I expect this to pan out. You auto-regulate, which is going to then cause you to change things in the future. And then when you build the next one, it'll also change your pre-planned strategies for the next mesocycle based on what actually happened and the notes that you took. So I think like it's you don't want to second guess and perseverate on your program for too long. Write it down, finish it, take a break, come back to it either another day or maybe a little bit while later, look at it again, see if there's any major errors, and then just start running it and just go. Otherwise, you're just going to be needlessly reviewing things over and over and over again. I do this with my clients all the time. When I'm looking at their program, I'll do like a quality check before I email it out, and I'm like, oh no, this exercise is on this day and this exercise. And at some point, you just got to be like, you know what? If it's not right, we'll find out pretty soon, because they're going to send me an email saying, hey, I'm having overlapping soreness, or my joints are hurting, or you know what I'm saying? It'll come out. So at some point, just bite the bullet and go. Don't perseverate.
You're serious about your goals, and the RP Diet app is here to help. It creates a diet for your specific needs, lets you choose your favorite foods, and tells you exactly how much of them to eat and when. Expert System AI guides you along to keep you on track to your goals. For less than $15 a month, you have one of the most powerful diet coaches in your pocket. Cutting-edge data science tailored to your exact goals. The future is here today.
Mike, I think you might have muted your microphone.
Sorry.
There we go.
It's nice that it pops up and says I'm muted. Another thing is, if you're really analytical, make sure that you're analytical about having good data to base your analysis off. And that means doing multiple weeks of unaltered training to get good data. People who change their training too much are not being as scientific as they think they are, because they're not allowing the program to show them what's going on. So if you want to be be perfectionist about doing a good job with every meso, and then looking back on it, spending a couple hours making the next one. Number two, how would you approach trying to teach a family member about principles of training without overwhelming them or confusing them? They seem interested but don't have a background in science, so it's hard to explain without getting technical. Just use common analogies. Use the car analogy is a really good one. I would watch some of my Steve Hall lectures or Steve Hall podcast episodes where I use a bunch of stupid analogies like that. And just speak in the simplest terms you possibly can. You know, growing muscle, that's not a technical term at all. Getting stronger, it's not a technical term. Training hard and really messing up the system, that's not technical at all. And all that stuff is, recovery is so non-technical. Be like, when you train, like, you get tired. James and I in the recovery book, we took, much to James's dismay, excessively, we used the cooking kitchen analogy, and that works really well. So you can read the recovery book. Like, training is like cooking in a kitchen. The point of cooking is for good stuff to come out the other end, for food you can eat. But while cooking, fatigue, i.e. dirty dishes and broken forks, all that stuff sort of sums up. You have to deal with it at some point, and try that. And just keep it as simple as you can. And look, a lot of the times, just understanding the simple stuff, they won't even be qualified to get really technical yet. So once they understand the simple stuff and they understand the concept, they want to know more, you can shoot them some articles about training. Honestly, Omar Yusuf and Greg Knuckles' books about the art and science of lifting are like exactly tailored to someone who's pretty sharp. And because of you talking to them for a while, learn some basics, then they're going to read those books and be like, wow, this stuff makes so much perfect sense.
Yeah, and without trying to devalue what Mike and I do, I mean, a lot of the stuff for hypertrophy and just training for health and fitness, it's pretty hard to fuck up. I mean, like, you can do a lot of not great things and get plenty of good results. Where it becomes more finicky is when you get into like more sports specific stuff. And that's where like a lot of the principles have a higher degree of constraints. Whereas just training for fitness and hypertrophy, like, man, the parameters that you have to work with are pretty broad. And as long as you put forth a reasonable effort and you're not doing completely stupid stuff, you'll be fine. So don't overthink it.
Pretty broad, huh, James? You fucking broad.
Well, I mean, like, so like, you mean like if we were talking about training for rugby or soccer or anything like that, then yeah, you'd have to say like, you have to understand a principled approach to developing the KPIs for those particular sports. But for hypertrophy, it's like, man, okay, you're going to lift some weights. You have a pretty You have a lot of options in terms of how much weight you want to lift, and you have a lot of options in terms of how many days per week you want to lift and how long each session is. Like, just go for it.
Yep. Lucas Carvalho from Brazil. What's up, man? Number one, assuming a non-beginner, about 3 years of lifting with OK programming, 18 to 23% body fat, should the primary goal for both hypertrophy and strength gains, medium to long-term, be to cut to 10 to 15% body fat ASAP, assuming a decent diet, or to maximize time on surplus rates of muscle and strength gain later on, or would a slower, less drastic approach of a mix of dieting, maintaining even out in the long run, since the trainee wouldn't be advanced enough to only gain mass/strength on specific periodization phase combined with calorie surplus. So gaining is a giant fucking misuse of time. It's not a waste of time for beginners and intermediates, but it's a poor use of time. Because everything you get on gaining, what is it? Gaintaining is what Steve Hall called it. Everything you can get out of gaintaining, you can do better out of masses and cut combinations. It doesn't mean they need to be extreme, but they need to be there, right? Like, you know, you don't have to gain like a pound a week, but if you gain a quarter of a pound a week, or like, you know, an eighth of a kilo a week, that's still better than not gaining anything at all. So you should still have goals to gain and lose. And fat loss phases for beginners can be relatively sharp because you know, you just don't need to be spending a whole lot of time getting super lean. I would say what should you do with body fat? Like, if you're between 18 and 23% body fat, you can absolutely just keep making great gains for years and years and years. The question is, do you want to be in that percent body fat and suffer the slightly poorer health consequences and also just look like, you might as well look cool during that time. So I would say cut to 10 to 15%, not ASAP, but, you know, like in the next few years, you know, down a little bit more, up, down a little bit more, up, until you're about 10 to 15 for many people. And then you'll look awesome and enjoy the hypertrophy lifestyle and get a bunch of stuff out of it. So I just wouldn't hang around 18 to 23 if you have the genetics to comfortably sit between 10 and 15, because I did this. The thing is, when I was coming up, that's exactly what I did. I was between 18 and 23 my entire natty career, pretty much. And I just have a lot of memories of getting really big, really strong, and never looking like it. And also paying some health costs. Like, my health was not as good as it could have been because I was excessively high body fat. So.
Yeah, you know, this is one of those too, like, when in doubt, get to like a reasonable, when in doubt, get to a level of body comp that you're happy with. When you look in the mirror, you say like, yeah, I'm pretty good with how I look. Then from that point, you can always go up and down, and you could do more strength if you want, or you can do more hypertrophy if you want. Get to that point first and go from there.
I'm chewing still. Sorry.
It's okay.
All right. Number 2, considering side delts, A, poor leverages, B, small size, C, how quickly they tend to recover, which is a factor of all those, D, how little they contribute to systemic fatigue. Would it be feasible to consider they could have insane MRVs now that we have all the time in the world to train them? The point would be, hypothetically, without special sports supplements, do 2x a day, 5 to 6 days per week, 4 to 5 sets of lateral raises, and still recover / not impair the rest of our training. Or am I just a dreamer about to be humbled by my crappy recovery capacity? And if yes, would that apply to other muscle groups, biceps, calves, abs? Maybe. So it's a really, really good, straightforward, super awesome answer to this. If you think your MRV for a muscle, if you think a muscle recovers really, really fast, thus its MRV is really high. However much you're currently training it, go one step above that. Do a mesocycle, see how it works. If you, again, seem to recover just fine and get even better gains, do it again. Go up another one. So let's say you're training delts 3 times a week right now. Do a meso at 4. Everything's hunky-dory. Do a meso at 5. Everything's great. Do a meso at 6. Everything's great. Do some 2-a-days for delts. Your arms fall off your body. That was too much. That's it. Yeah. Do not almost ever go from normal shit to psycho shit.
Yes.
Always grade your shit, because it's a good way to get hurt or to not have any idea of the following. Did you miss the U-shaped curve altogether? Example, you used to do delts twice a week. You tried the psycho delt, the Lucas Carvalho psycho delt program, okay? And then all of a sudden, you didn't grow. But basically, or you got the same results as twice a week. You could go telling people, you know, high frequency and high volume is stupid. Except the reality is, an alternate universe, Lucas, was gaining unbelievable gains at 5 times per week, just once a day. So right between those. So you got to grade your exposure to stay safe. And also another thing is, like, the muscle may very well recover. Your glenohumeral joint may not recover at all. I certainly can't do lateral raises twice a day hard. because my shoulders would fall right the fuck off my body. And I have like Titanic fucking shoulders that just don't ever get hurt. Even for me, they would get pushed to the limit. So ease in. James?
Yeah, I'm actually doing like an arms and delts specialization phase right now for massing. Oh, thanks. And I do a combination of side, front, and rear delt work. Some of them are isolation, some of them are compound. And I did my math for this last peak week, and it was like collectively over 55 sets total on delts. But again, that's because of the conditions where for me, it's like I'm just training arms and delts. Yes, I'm doing delts effectively 6 days per week, not always side delts, but mostly side delts. Yeah. And you can take a lot of punishment. But if I was doing a lot of bench pressing and a lot of pull-ups at the same time, that absolutely would not be the case, and my shit would blow up, right? So you got to play around with it. But like Mike said, you could eventually ramp up to those kind of levels, but it has to be progressive. You can't just go from like standard training to insanity training. That's just a guaranteed way to get hurt.
Yeah. Number 3, assuming the same hypothetical trainer from question 1, 3 years of OK training, do you think someone focused basically on powerlifting / their direct auxiliary movements while in a decent strength program, periodization still needs to direct accessories for biceps, calves, abs, side delts to maintain their muscle size? Do you think someone focusing basically on powerlifting?
Oh, is he saying like, so if you do the power lifts, do you have to do a lot of direct accessory work to maintain your muscle? Is that Mike? That's what I'm guessing what he's asking.
I don't know. There's actually no actual technical question there. Do you think someone focusing on basically on powerlifting, and then there's a slash, periodization still needs direct accessories? Oh, do they still need direct accessories for biceps, calves, abs?
Do you need to do direct training
to maintain their muscle size? Yes, absolutely. No amount of powerlifting training in the world is going to maintain your biceps if you used to training them directly and you don't anymore.
Yes.
Definitely not calves. Abs probably.
Maybe,
but abs,
maybe not.
if you check out our articles on abs on the Hypertrophy Hub, abs actually have a maintenance volume of 0 because just training heavy maintains them just fine. Side delts, definitely. Yeah, you will lose side delt size if you only squat, bench, and deadlift, for sure. If you're used to doing side delts direct, it'll be a little bit of loss, but it will be a lot. Mm-hmm. How about to gain size in those muscles, even if not at their maximum, most efficient rate?
Yeah,
definitely not.
You'd have to directly train them if you want to make gains on them. Powerlifting training would not cover that.
Yeah. TLDR, does squat, bench, deadlift training hit MV and or MEV for those muscles, assuming average non-beginner, non-advanced lifter? No, not even for non-beginners, for sure not. Even for beginners, it's by no means clear. So I'll put it this way, like if someone's doing squat, bench, and deadlift, how much are their biceps going to grow? Or calves, like some, yeah, just because they're lifting weights for the first time. But after maybe a year or two of that, that growth starts to get real slow. And unless you gain a lot of weight, this is not going to be nearly remotely the fastest way to do that. So
yeah, the only one you might see like a little contribution towards your MV would be like the side delts from all the benching. But I mean, you'd still need to be doing direct training at that point.
Yeah. Eli Holland says, greetings, Mike and James. It's been far too long since I posed the question. Since then, I've been accepted to UCLA's Masters in Public Health program for fall 2020. Hey, that'll be a fun program.
Nice.
With the COVID-19 thing, right? Public health. I've been working as a personal trainer prior to the Rona and have had great success training clients for fat loss. And thanks to the information that RP, 3MJ, Mass Arrive Stronger, and other members of the evidence-based fitness community. Cool. Given how successful evidence-based fitness and nutrition is for a variety of health issues, my goal is to get medical insurance to extend coverage to the services provided by personal trainers and strength coaches for the treatment and prevention of obesity and its comorbidities, neurodegenerative disease, sarcopenia, etc. One of my training clients...
Isn't that what I said last time?
One of my training clients is a professional breakdancer, which is something I have picked up over the quarantine as a hobby. Through practice, I have found I need to increase my upper body concentric and isometric pressing strength, in addition to isometric and eccentric core work and back strength. I'm predominantly focused on strength training now, period. Okay, should have been period there. Should I be organizing my isometric and eccentric training on the same day after my concentric pressing work, either directly after or later in the day, or should I do it as its own dedicated session? James?
I'm not totally understanding. So is he saying he's doing like specific concentric only work, or is he just mean like what I'm doing? I would just stop doing that. So here's the thing. There's a good reason why, because you're going to make a lot more gains in strength just using standard training methods like a regular bench press, and whatever kind of specificity that you need for breakdancing, you'll get from doing the breakdancing itself. So like, what's a good way of developing overhead strength or even just pressing strength. Okay, bench press, overhead press, push press. Like, find me something that's going to make that progress faster than the pressing strength faster than those movements. The other thing with the concentric only stuff is like it's impossible to implement unless you have like a really specific setup, because you can't just always be dropping things. You can't. It's a lot more fuss than it seems like. So my point is that the contextual strength you need from breakdancing will manifest as you make gains in strength across training, and then you practice breakdancing. So the transfer of training effect of the strength training will be more effective just doing traditional strength training than trying to do like a hybrid, hyper-specific type of training. That's just that would be, in my opinion, an over-application of specificity, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And just folks remember that what James is saying is do your regular training like you would do it just to get fucking strong in the compound movements. And then your breakdancing skill training is going to train you a lot to get specifically transfer that general strength into specific strength. So if you're doing like the jump to lockout elbow thing where like guys will lock out on one arm and stand on one arm, like, should you be doing one arm tricep extensions in the gym? No, you should be doing like compound overhead movement and just regular skull crushers and overhead extensions to get fucking big and strong. And then when you go practice that shit, if you have a helper or just by yourself, you're going to have more and more success getting more and more time spent on one arm, time on two arms, you know. So like after a while, your hypertrophy and your strength is just going to reflect better. There's a limit to specificity in the gym. And this is something that is like a huge divide between evidence-based strength coaches and everyone else. Because everyone else thinks the way to strength coach is to try to mimic the exact movements you're doing as much as possible, load them. That has tons of problems with it, and it really it ends up being like, man, what's
garbage, junk volume.
It's just there's no need to have that. It's almost like this. Instead of you want the best, you want to make the best steak ever and make it tasty, you end up trying to get the knife also steak flavored. Like, what the fuck? Just why don't the knife is to cut the steak, cut the steak good, and then have the steak speak for itself. Don't make a steak flavored knife or a steak smelling plate. That's a bit fucking ridiculous. It's taking things that aren't supposed to be like something and making them something else. So just the same way, you get big and strong in the specific muscles and similar movement types, pushes, pulls in the gym, and then in practice you use that newfound abilities to practice better, getting both the extra strength training from that practice and the directly transferable skill set.
Yeah, really good. So just, like, treat it like you would treat like any other sporting endeavor, where you have like a fitness component that you're training, you have a skill component that you're training, which is like being able to actually execute the moves, and you can grade those to the intensity of those skills practice to your level, right? And in this case, you have the intersectionality of fitness and skill. In this case, you might not be strong enough to hit certain moves yet, but that's perfectly okay. Like, you can scale it down, find alternatives, find other things that you can do. And as you progress in strength, you can scale up the intensity of your skill work. And then your tactics is kind of like how you put the routines together and strategize that and have fun with it. It's funny that this came up because I'm literally writing in the book that I'm working on, the fads and fallacies section. I'm working on the over application of specificity.
Oh, fad one.
I was working on that today, so it was apt timing.
Well, here's another specificity fallacy coming up for you, James, in the next part of the question.
No.
What is the difference between high rep sets for hypertrophy versus sets for cardiovascular conditioning? I'll knock this one up into the air, James, and you can swing it away. I understand that hypertrophy sets are 5 to 30 reps between like 50 and 81 RM. Yeah, close. With 2 to 5 minute breaks between sets. Would sets for conditioning be something like 10 to 100 reps, so 0 to 50% 1 RM, 0% 1 RM. RP 9 to 10 with 0.5 to 2 minute rest break an example between examples. So there is no such thing as cardiovascular conditioning. It doesn't exist. It's a spectrum from conditioned to do reps of this many number and this many sets well and recover well between them, all the way out to endurance walking across America. It is every different kind of, it's cardiovascular conditioning for what? So if you're a strong man, there's no such thing as conditioning. There is, I'm doing conditioning that mimics the stones. That endurance pushes me on the stone. So it's going to be heavy lifting, repeated, heavy lifting, repeated, heavy lifting, repeated, the yoke, so on and so forth. If I'm a swimmer, my cardiovascular condition needs to improve probably through swimming, but it's a very different kind of rate duration. And if an elite cyclist, not just because he's better, but specifically for his sport, looked at your lifting weights with 50 reps at a time and resting a bit, he would laugh at you. That's anything like cardiovascular conditioning. He would say, fuck, that looks hard, but it's not going to get you much better on the bike because you need to get on the bike and get out of there for 2 hours. So it's all about what are you conditioning for? Because you can get pretty good cardiovascular conditioning just doing regular hypertrophy training, especially in the 15 to 30 rep zone with relatively 1 to 3 minute rest between sets. You get great general cardiovascular conditioning, better than most of the population. But if you're like, well, that's not quite enough, for what? For what? And then train that instead, James.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I did another James Does Sports episode, and one of the things I talked about, I did common cardio mistakes in sport training. That was the episode, and I think that'll be out this week, hopefully. But one of the things that came up on my discussion was turning other activities that are not meant to be cardio into cardio activities. That's a huge, huge no-no, folks. So the idea being, and this is what we see in strength conditioning all the time, where you basically have a perfectly reasonable strength conditioning program, and then a coach will walk in and be like, hey, I'll tell you what, man, these boys aren't working hard enough. So then they turn it into like stupid-ass cardio circus where they make everything like a circuit training just to make it harder. And so at this point, when people do this, they are no longer actually overloading the characteristics that they set out to in the first place, like strength, power, stuff like that, because the systemic fatigue of what they're doing is now too difficult, and they're not actually getting the cardiovascular training that they need for whatever activity that they're trying to train for. So it's like opportunity cost times 2. You're not actually getting the strength training stuff that you needed. You're not actually getting the cardio stuff that you needed. You just accumulated a whole shitload of junk volume, right? Which is the antithesis of a good evidence-based practice. So the idea here being is that when you go and train, you should be training for something specific. So when you're going in the weight room and you're training for strength or hypertrophy or, maybe both in a phasic structure, that's all you're doing. You're not trying to make it cardio. When you want to actually improve cardio, you go and do specific cardio training. So cardio is not done in the weight room, right? And we see this this is a different ramble, but same idea is when coaches do the same idea for developing skills and tactics in a training session, they'll be like, all right, we're going to be working on this particular skill, and then it's going to evolve into a drill. And instead of just allowing the athletes to have a high level of preparedness, a high level of alertness, and be really engaged with the activity, they're like, now let's make you fucking run around and make it crazy so nobody can focus on anything, right? Developing skills and tactics is hard enough under normal conditions, let alone when you artificially just make them fatigued for no reason, right? So the idea is don't make non-cardio activities cardiovascularly intensive. It doesn't serve any purpose, and it just creates a huge opportunity cost, tons of junk volume. It's the worst. I hate it. Don't do it.
One of the cool things about being involved, all sports have their pluses and minuses culturally, is how well they do sports science. One of the cool things about like jiu-jitsu and wrestling is there's very clear times to learn technique and very clear times to drill it. And most of the coaches just don't mix the two, which is great. If you walk in to a jiu-jitsu studio with like world champions during the technique part, they're bullshitting. They're moving through the techniques really slow. You're like, what is this? These boys ain't getting hard. Isn't worlds coming up? And you're like, okay, idiot. 30 minutes later, they go live and they go fucking hard and bleed everywhere. Like, oh, wait, that is two very different things. Like, some sports, they really just try to mix the shit together all the time. My hypothesis on strength conditioning coaches with football training, and actually football coaches, football training, American football is just not that hard. It's a sport mostly of showing off. Football is not a hard sport to play. Yeah, it fucks you up. The injury risk is tough. Psychologically, it can be daunting. But look, the plays last 3 to fucking 6 seconds, bro. It's just not that hard of a sport. Like, that's not to say hard doesn't mean like challenging. Hard means like individually on, you're not breathing. You're fucking breathing hard in football. So like they see that their athletes aren't struggling and they're like, nah, I need to alpha male them and put them down. So they make shit way too hard. Look, just is badminton like that? Do they fucking shit on their athletes?
And they make
Probably
it hard
not.
for the wrong reasons and the wrong ways, right? You're just making it hard for the sake of being hard. And also you're not making it hard in a relevant way to what they're actually trying to do. Like, do you want to make football training more hard? Make them do more squats, more bench press, more power cleans, more sprints. Like, there you go.
Follow a diet better. Shit on them. Like, make fun of them if they're not getting faster season to season because they're
don't
like
be
lazy.
500 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Next question. Are there any differences between isometric holds and high rep sets for improving local muscular endurance? Yes, there's a specific isometric endurance you can develop. It's also a technical aspect. Would we use isometric holds to improve a tissue's tolerance to load in a given position? Exactly. If that's what it comes back to sport-specific training. put it this way. If you want to hold a handstand for a while, guess what the best training is for that? I mean, it's going to be crazy, but handstand holding for time.
Yes.
That's the trick.
A very similar question came up on the video that's going to be posted later. Somebody was asking about rock climbing, and the same idea there is you use forearm and forearm strengthening exercises to improve the force output of your gripping muscles, and then you use sport specific kind of endurance training, which would be like doing an isometric hold in a certain position. Or then the example the guy was using was like wall hangs. He was saying, can I do wall hangs to gain strength? And I said, no, do something like forearm curls and grippers to gain strength, and then use the wall holds to gain work capacity and endurance in that position.
In practice, there's a technique to wall hangs.
Yeah.
Next one. What are the biomechanics of the upper body during shoulder extension and shoulder flexion above and below 90 degrees of flexion?
This is not, I'm sorry to be a dickhead, but we got to be a little bit more specific on this question.
What are the biomechanics of the upper body during lateral adduction and abduction above and below 90? So, Eli, James being a dick, so I'll be more of a dick. This is all meant in really good faith. We don't mean to get at you. What are the biomechanics is not a tenable question to answer, because if we describe to you every possible different degree of momentum and angular velocity and acceleration and load bearing, we would give you a set of algorithms that would fill up all the data banks of the world's data. Like your brain has to process some number of petaflops per second to get your arm to do this. Are you asking if it's safe to do that, or what? I'm sure there's a great question there. Just hit us back on the next webinar and re-ask that, please.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for your help. Our pleasure. Let us know if you need more follow-up. Hi, Mr. Doctor, says Erno Toivonen. No homo, but Dr. James, your new haircut is cool.
Yeah. All right. Finally, some love.
Why do people say no homo? It's 2020. It's totally fine.
Max homo.
Max homo. Number one, I finished the first week of 5-day male physique template. I guess it's the volume distributed to more sessions, but it feels so much better than the 4-day MPT. When do I need to buy bigger clothes due to being so jacked?
Tomorrow.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. I was there. James here, similar mindset. Number one serious question: does more training sessions in a week with the same training volume cause more calorie usage? It might, because of the fact that your training quality is higher. It's less junky volume. You actually can produce sort of if your volume is the same set number wise, but every set is on average a little bit heavier, it actually uses more calories, right? So yes. And then he says, for example, 3 days a week of 20 sets per workout versus 5 days a week and 12 sets per workout. I would theorize, yes, more sessions use more calories since the after workout heat occurs more often. The after workout heat occurs proportionally to how much working out you do in the workout. Right. So that tends to cancel out. But the enhancement of the raw stimulus magnitude absolutely goes a long way. So basically, like, if you split up your training more, you just lift more weight and or do more reps per set, and then that way you burn more calories.
There's also the effect of, depending on how you have your nutrition set up, you might just be doing less non-training day nutritions, which is presumably lower than your training day nutrition, which is a kind of a calorie mitigator also throughout the week. So it could just be some of that too.
Number two, how would you do a conservative bulk without knowing exact maintenance calories? Meaning slowly grow calories week per week until the weight gain rate is enough, or eat a lot right off the bat and back down calories until you reach the weight gain rate you want. I prefer to ease into my mass gains, so I would actually like to see a week of you not gaining anything, or 2 weeks of not gaining anything, and then slowly ramp. It's easy to get really fat,
Yes.
and when you get really fat really fast, it just interferes, or caps how much muscle you can grow, because your mass can't last as long. You have to be less aggressive. So I like the bottom-up approach versus the top-down approach.
Same here. It's easier to add calories. In my experience, it's harder to take them away. It just gets more confusing.
Number three, what I have understood, people are able to have a very productive bodybuilding training, even with old age, let's say 40 plus years of age, when they're enhanced. When training natural, usually 4 age is the limit. At least this is my understanding when seeing the age of people competing. I guess productive bodybuilding training can be considered as competitive level in this case, or just an intermediate individual level. Of course, there are differences between individuals, some kind of a general idea. Am I right? Actually, not so much. People retire from both sports at roughly about the same time. There's actually tons of really, really excellent natural competitors in the 40s. If you start to enhance in your late 30s or early 40s, you can continue to get better until your 50s. But if you've been enhanced since your 20s or something, you peak enhanced just about the same time as you do naturally, it turns out. And sometimes enhanced people don't last that long because their health gives way before they stop.
Yeah. The nice thing about physique sports is that it's one where you do kind of age well, and that you just have more time on earth to actually accumulate more muscle and get better and better and better at training. So in that regard, it's kind of cool and unique. Whereas sports like rugby, like after you're about 27, it's over, homie. You can't sustain the wear and tear anymore.
There's actually tons of sports where anatomically or physiologically you would be better at them when you're older, but you're just so fucked up that like a lot of like former strongmen and powerlifters transition to bodybuilding and have these awesome careers in it and get the most jacked they've ever been and even the most statically strong in the gym. And they're like, well, why did you leave strongman? They're like, because if I pull another stone off the ground, both of my biceps are coming off my body.
Right.
All right. Number 4, I have never witnessed any weight gain when I'm using creatine. Does this mean that it's useless in hypertrophy purposes for me? It also has some other health benefits, so I would use it regardless. My theory is that if my weight doesn't rise, creatine is absorbed places where it would go if it was needed. That's not true 100%, but it is shown that better responders do gain more weight off the creatine. So yeah, you're probably not the greatest responder, but it still might have some benefits.
There is also like a very narrow group of people who experience nausea from creatine, which I'm finding out, which is kind of strange. Yeah.
I'm super glad I'm not one of those people.
So Mike, he asked some questions below, but I actually answered these specific questions that are highlighted on the other weekly series that we're doing. So hopefully they'll be posted on Thursday, Erno, and I did answer those questions already. So keep tuned for that.
Excellent. All right, Mark Conway is back. Ari from Newcastle, my favorite doctoral duo. I hate to be repetitive, but thank you both again for your advices last week. For sure. This week, I just have a few more questions about progressing through my modified version of Metabolite Focus Monocycle from a 5-day MPT. I'm still getting good pumps, and my performance is steady with my volume increases. I'm gaining weight consistently too, albeit a little more in the gut region that is optimal. Okay, make sure you keep tabs on that. I'm currently in week 4, training 1 from fail. I plan to run this for 5 to 6 weeks, going to failure on my final week and approach MRV through increased volume. My questions are, to target my quads during squats, I've been performing them wearing squat shoes, elevating my heels using a textbook. This works a treat. However, I was wondering whether both in combination are overkill. No, unless your knees feel really fucked up, James.
Or unless it's just so unbearably awkward that you can't get a good like training stimulus going.
Yeah, totally.
But other than that, no.
Yeah. Next one. I noticed in your hypertrophy guides that for optimal results, you recommend training muscles such as arms and side delts with more frequency than in the 5-day MPT. If I wanted to increase frequency and total number of weekly sets, is it sensible to add them on one of my sessions earlier in the week, provided I avoid overlapping soreness? Or would you recommend training 6 days per week instead? No, you can add them and just avoid overlapping soreness and make sure you're rating things appropriately.
Yeah.
Following on from my last question, would it be sensible to add an extra sets earlier in the week, 2 extra sets of bicep curls at this stage of my program, providing I don't introduce a new exercise and use the same movement that I perform later in the week? You can even introduce a new exercise. It's not the biggest deal in the world. Just start with just a few sets. Don't like add 6 sets in.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
I tend to be fussy about adding in exercises midway through, but like Mike said, it really isn't a big deal. It's just me being anal.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, but I think where James is super on the money is like, don't make that a habit. Like you can do it every now and again, but like waiting until later is even better. But if you want to add it in, fine. Definitely don't add in a new exercise that you've never done before. You know, if it's tried and true and you know how it makes you feel, like you've done cable curls a million times, you add them in, fine. But don't be like, what James I think is really against is like you seeing something on YouTube and be like, wow, a cross dumbbell bicep curl. I'm going to add this into my already 4-week long meso. Like, don't do that. You have no idea. Here's the thing. There's downstream consequences, right? That new crossbody bicep curl could be totally fine to do by itself and in the context of a low volume program, but in the context of a lot of pulling and shoulder pressing, you could irritate your proximal bicep tendon, for example. And all of a sudden it just throws away your entire mesocycle of progression, right? Like you just never know how that stuff can interact. It's kind of like a stupid kitchen analogy back, James is going to kill me. But like you've got this great soup recipe and you've made it a bunch of times and then you're like, ooh, I wonder what'll happen if I add in some paprika. Like, yeah, that could be a good thing. And if you've added paprika to foods before and you know how it makes foods taste and you know how much you're adding and you've sort of played around with like a similar soup, like, yeah, maybe it's fine, right? If someone's coming over and they're like, I really want paprika and everything, maybe that's cool. But like, if you've got nothing to gain off of something like that, it could fuck up a lot of stuff and just keep what's good. And then if you want to make soup with paprika, look up that recipe next time. It's like designing your next meso. You know what I mean? Like just
totally. Yeah. And getting back to that previous question, and Mike made a really good point. It's like, it's better and more often than not to just do a good job with what you're doing and take notes and use a scientific process rather than being willy-nilly and impulsive on stuff, because there's no way to like really assess how your mesocycle went. If you're changing things midway through it, you're kind of left with not anything conclusive. So I would be more apt to see you just finish out the meso and add that on the next one and see how that goes rather than starting midway through. But again, not a huge deal.
All right.
Okay.
Last one.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, one more. Finally, after my deload, what would you guys recommend going forward? As I have completed high volume phase, my approach in a corona-free world would just go through resensitization. However, given that I only have access to 9 kilogram dumbbells, would it be worth doing another high volume metabolite phase? I ask here as I'm aware that I won't be responsive to that type of stimulus after a 5-6 week period. I was wondering whether I could still make some decent gains with another metabolite phase, or if I would simply be adding fat for minimal additional muscle. And I think it's a good time, like James said earlier in the webinar, when in doubt, do maintenance phase. I would maintain and see if the coronavirus bans don't get lifted within the next month or two, which they probably will. So it'd be sweet if you took like a 4-week resensitization meso with the light dumbbells, which you totally can do, and you won't lose any muscle, especially in the long term. And I can imagine like you're slogged through this bullshit halfway metabolite meso that sucked, and then gym's open, and you're like, imagine you like just took 4 weeks to take it a little easy and resensitize, and then gym's open. And you go, holy shit, this is great. And if you're open, you'll be ready to do another metabolite meso. So I would say that maintenance is probably best at this point.
And that's the thing. It's like at least from the training end of things, you really only need a couple weeks to resensitize. So like you can start off with the maintenance phase, and if in 2 weeks, right, like they say, okay, gym's open, you could just go do whatever it is that you want to do at that point. It's one of those like win-win where if you just do the maintenance phase, you get the desired effect, or you start doing the maintenance phase and things change. You still got the desired effect, even if you cut it a little bit short, and then you're off doing whatever it is that you want to do. So, man, it's a safe bet. I would do that.
All right. Ready?
I'm ready.
We go and we hit the...
Oops, wait, sorry. I hit the share button. There you go.
Share. I hit the share button. I can only do it. All right. Let's first look at my...
This webinar are mine now.
Let's look at the algorithms. We got Orlando Sanchez versus
Nick
Rodriguez.
Yeah.
We got John Meadows, How to Get Ripped. God damn.
Oh, to show unmitigated discipline.
Yeah, Jocko always bringing... God, he's so scary.
He's too intense, too much. Just chill.
Well, cool. Skinniest I've been in 20 years. Renaissance Periodization app. Some gentleman named Brandon Campbell has got 26,000 views. I've never seen this video.
What?
Cool. Thanks
Cool.
for
Hey, there's your wife.
Thanks for the app review. I can't tell if it's an app review or endorsement. Let's find out. Oh, yeah. Crystal's shoulder press review is doing it well. Let's see. Looking like Captain America before the serum.
Huh.
Oh, he didn't know you could adjust the schedules. Oh. Anyway.
Nice pause.
Sorry,
you got with the eyes closed.
Skinny. Yeah, that sucks. All right. Anyway, nothing else too festive here. How to do your fistula squats, Squat University. God, can you imagine running a channel exclusively about squats? Holy fuck.
Oh, man, I would run out of stuff to talk about.
Yeah. All right. Let us get through and okie doke. Peyton Down says, I really enjoy Below Job.
Classic.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Because the cardio and confidence it gives me in sketchy situations, I would like to pick it back up after having my shoulder hurt in training and then taking time to heal. It was, I was wondering if there's a way to train BJJ with a significant decrease in injury risk, because at the end of the day, hypertrophy comes first. Yes. So one is when you live roll, you don't ever use your own strength a ton or explosiveness a ton. Don't go with crazy heavy, super explosive, psychotic people. And otherwise train mostly technique and flow roll a lot. And that's sort of a knob you can push up and down. If you want to take a little bit more risk, go for the crazier rolls, be a bit more dynamic and use your strength. And if you want to reduce the risk, do more drilling, less rolling. And when you do roll with smaller people, less aggressive people, more technical people. And don't try to wrench them. You can make jiu-jitsu almost completely injury-free by just flowing the whole time, and you'll learn a ton. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could, if you want to be really conservative about your injury, you could just not roll at all and just focus on skills like technique and drilling and just save any of the rolling. And just, there's almost always going to be somebody in your gym who is in a similar situation where they can't roll for whatever reason. And I'm sure you can just drill and do stuff like that.
All right. Cushion 13. Hey, docs, I have a question for Dr. Mike. Ha! Take that, James.
I'm out.
Shit.
Signing off.
See ya. I have a question for Dr. Mike. My wife and I are both following your progression guidelines. We start our 4-to-1 accumulation phase in week 1 of our meso with 3 RIR, and then week 2 we progress to 2 RIR. The problem is when we go 2 inches in a row, oh my God.
Wait.
God damn it. He trolled us successfully.
Mm.
When we go 2 inches in reserve,
it was a sex joke.
I thought accumulates too much, too much fatigue. It's quite big. We assess the proxies you indicate the fatigue in the local musculature, the perception of tension in the pussy. I like the $ pussy. And the quality of the orgasms. Oh, fuck, you ain't giving nobody orgasms. We'll get to that in a sec. They all seem very high. I'm saying looks can be deceiving. Should we deload to wash away the fatigue? Oof, wash it away. Or should we go hard? How hard do you ask? How hard do you ask? Harder than last time. That last one is a Greg Doucette joke.
There was a lot to unpack on that one.
There's a lot to unpack. Guy, the computer mouse is not your wife. Although the jokes were really funny. So pat yourself on the back, but not too hard. Because your 2 inches could be frail. So that was good.
Yeah.
That was good. I'm not going to count that as a real question, but look, if you're going to troll, this is a very good effort. You know,
Definitely went over my head until it was too late.
Yeah. All right. James, this one's for you. Another fun one. Why not? What's the MRV in watching anime? Does it share systemic fatigue with reading comic books?
Oh man, so like you can definitely hit the MRV with anime because like as most people who watch anime know, it's not like you can't just jump. Like the first episode is usually you don't just like jump in. You have to kind of invest like 3 to 5 episodes before you make up your mind as to whether or not it was like a good, a show that you're going to enjoy. And a lot of the times you'll strike out like 2 or 3 times in a row, and that means you just watched like 15 episodes and they're all shitty, and then you're just like, you know what, fuck it. That's definitely happened to me before. But it's not the same. Like graphic novels is usually a little easier to get into. I just got the new Batman one. I think it's called Last Night. It's weird. And it's Scott Snyder, who I really like, is one of the authors.
Ooh-wee. All right.
Oh boy.
Craig Autty says, I'm confused as to how science says don't train stupidly hard. It doesn't say that. It says don't train stupidly hard all the time. But then guys with the most muscle mass history has seen, e.g. Dorian and Ronnie, both trained stupid hard.
It's not an issue of training. It's an issue of...
Jay Cutler was never known for his hard training, and he was at least as muscular as both of them. So we've got a little bit of selection bias going on. Big Rainey is known for a lot of things, training pretty hard, but not super anything crazy. He's bigger than both for sure. Tons of other guys bigger or as big. And
that's the thing. It's like a tit for tat type argument, right? It has nothing to do with training. It has just like, here's one example. Here's another example.
And then it says, are you saying they would have been even bigger if they didn't train as hard? Yeah. So let's say train hard. So Dorian Yates didn't do much work. He prided himself on low volume training. Could he have gotten bigger if he did higher volumes? I would bet that's almost certainly the case. If he went less close to failure and managed fatigue properly, could he have gotten bigger? Yes, probably. Absolutely. Imagine in the 1960s, watching Larry Scott train, and he like did a lot of weird shit, and you'd be like, oh, really? You think you could do better than Larry Scott? And then Big and Ronnie back from the future does better stuff, still not perfect, and be like, yes, we can. So there's going to be someone, imagine how fucking confusing it'll be to folks that don't understand this. And Craig, I don't think you're one of them because you're opening your mind up to this stuff of taking, someone from like 2025 Olympia who gets a coach like, somebody like Matt Jansen, somebody intelligent, and they no longer train everything completely failure all the time. They do progressive overload. They do good technique. And all of a sudden, he's the most jacked guy ever. He's like 335 on stage with veins. Are we now going to cock ride that guy and emulate everything he's doing? We got to think a little bit, like the best of the best have some commonalities, but the best of the best also do some things wrong, and they're not ideal. So yeah, we can give that some thought. When studies are done to measure fatigue on all-out training, does it take into account the increase in muscle endurance?
Increasing muscle endurance from what? From doing a test or from training?
Yeah, let's see. Dorian literally did the exact opposite of what you say by going to failure every exercise. Okay, that's actually not the opposite of what I say. He just marginally went a few reps closer to failure than I would recommend. So we give almost the same advice. The opposite of what I would say is to never ever train to failure, which I've never said. And also I would say stay as far away from failure as possible. That's the opposite advice. So it's very clear on that. And build to most the most muscle the world has ever seen at the time, doing what you say not to do. Confusing. It is confusing. I think
it's not.
So it's not confusing. So one human hardly proves anything. Flex Wheeler is notorious for being lazy as fuck. Kevin Levrone, why don't you take Kevin Levrone? Kevin Levrone trained 4 months out of the year. Other than that, he went on tour with his rock band in which he was a performer and mostly just drank alcohol and fucked bitches. I don't suppose you would think that would make you look like Kevin Levrone. And if you look at all the best guys from that era, they don't have a ton in common with Dorian Yates, other than the fact that everyone trains pretty hard. But how hard is very speculative. It's not clear that Flex Wheeler ever actually went to 0 RIR because he's probably too lazy and didn't want to do that. So he probably faked failure most of his life. And this is something he's basically alluded to in a variety of interviews. So you can pick, a number of the best and say, this is how they train. Jay Cutler, I don't know why you missed him, but he was a phenomenal bodybuilder, never really preached training super close to failure, never really preached, he did plenty of volume, but lots of sets that were submaximal, not even a ton of the compound hardcore super, because he had unbelievable legs. He never said squat, that's all you do. He did leg extensions and all kinds of machines and stuff. So I think, basing just 1 or 2 guys and saying this is how you have to train, would they have been better if they trained more intelligently? Yes. Or they would have been just as good, but had more longevity. Unless you're prepared to talk unless you're prepared to make specific claims, there is something very special about going to failure that makes you much, much bigger. It's been studied and that's shown not to be the case. Now, maybe it hasn't been studied in the right people. Maybe in elite hardcore bodybuilders, that is the case. Maybe that's true, but you're not an elite hardcore bodybuilder, so you probably shouldn't be training close to failure like these guys are, potentially. Another one is you could say, okay, well, deloading is stupid and they never did it. Okay, what's your argument against deloading? That people don't accumulate fatigue, that it's not beneficial? Those are all lost on any kind of physiological rationale. And in the real world, they don't even work all that well. And just because some people, there's also a selection bias here. These are just the guys that survived. It's like people doing the Bulgarian training program for Olympic weightlifting and saying well, I just max every day. That wasn't a program. That was a weeder system designed to see who would fucking make it, and by a person who didn't really care about lifters or human beings. And tons of those lifters quit. Fuckloads of them got injured. Most of them hated their lives. And
you never heard about any of those guys.
Yeah. And they would almost never do 2 Olympics in a row. And a bunch of Soviet lifters would win 2 Olympics and then 3 Olympics and shit like that. And they were just as good, except they didn't run them into the ground. So it's very, very difficult to conclude a lot on just what 1 or 2 guys are doing that are the very best. I think if you take all elite bodybuilders, their commonalities are probably on the right track, but with caveats, because even the very best of the best can make systemic mistakes. Again, if you go back to the 1960s, in bodybuilding, you would say, these guys are the best of the best. Look at what they're doing. They were doing some different stuff than they are now. And don't be caught with your fucking dick in your hand in 20 years when everyone's caught up and doing way more right shit. You were defending the wrong shit just because you say, well, these are the biggest guys. They have to know what they're doing. They know some good stuff, and you can take some stuff out of that for sure. But they may be wrong on some things, and you don't want to be the guy, the last one holding the hot potato.
You know who's bigger than those guys? How about Andre the Giant or the Big Show? What kind of training did they do that made them so big?
Training.
Mm-hmm. You can just, it's one of these tit for tat things. You can't just cherry pick examples of people who do all sorts of, it's one of these where people can be successful in spite of doing things that are not in line with what the current scientific consensus is. This happens all the time. John Jones is a great example. He doesn't train. He just chokes hookers all the time, and he's the world champion. Is that how people should be training for sport? No, same idea.
Yep. All right. HM.
Okay.
Not to be incellulous here, incellulous, nice. But if the stimulus and fatigue lines are parallel and have a positive gradient greater than X, then SFR would not be constant. It would be a horizontally straight line.
I don't really care. Sorry, I don't want to get into pedantic arguments. Maybe we said something incorrectly.
No, we didn't. That's just wrong. A horizontally straight line is constant because it's the same. It yields the same y-axis number. It's 3, 3, 3. Horizontal straight line is always 3. So no worries. Oh, let's see. Give an example. Let's see if you fuck this up.
Let's just skip. This is stupid. I don't.
Hold on, James. Just one. Just one.
It's dumb. Who cares?
You're dumb. No,
I am dumb. I am dumb.
Hold on. Let's see. Example, point A, stimulus 10 units, fatigue 5 units. Point B, stimulus B.
This is just one of these, somebody is trying to one up some. If we said something incorrect, we say dumb shit all the time. It happens. whatever. If it's not the most, I'm the most guilty. Let's just actually answer one more actual question.
So so we're not saying the stimulus and fatigue go up by the same amount. We're saying they go up by the same ratio. So a very, very SL comment. It does come off as trolly, but we're not saying the stimulus and fatigue go up by the same amount. We're saying they go up by the same ratio to each other, which it takes into account the rise and slope. All right, next question, actual question, but good thinking, I suppose. James, can you guys talk about elevation training masks?
A little bit, yeah. So what do they
do and what do they not do? How about just that?
Okay, so what do? They train your inspiratory muscles really, really hard.
Muscles designed to breathe in.
Yeah. What do they not do? Train your cardiovascular system to a real significantly harder degree, right? So it makes you really good at breathing. It just doesn't make you actually extract like more oxygen out of the atmosphere. It just makes you able to extract more air into your lungs, which is good to a point, but the transfer of training effect on sport activities is extremely limited.
I think that's it. That's 3. That's more than 3.
All right. Well, let's wrap this one up for today. We went for like hour and 40, so that's pretty good. All right, folks, I'm going to have another episode of James Does Sports. I did some Q&A and some common cardio mistakes in sport training. Hopefully that will be out this week, probably on Thursday. If you guys have any kind of sport-specific questions that you want me to answer, you can either post them in the webinar here, I'll sift in the webinar comments, or you can just post them on my previous episodes. Either one is fine. If you have a specific situation, it would be helpful. Somebody said something like, can you cover high school wrestling? I can, but if you have like a more of a contextual scenario that you want me to address, that would be probably more use for everybody and myself. So let me know if you have specific scenarios or weird things that come up, and I'll cover those. Mike, you got something going on? Anything going on?
Nothing I can care to remember.
All right. Well, make sure you guys subscribe if you enjoy our ridiculous banter, and stay tuned for more Q&A on the way. We'll see you next time.
Peace, guys.